Do you have loads of scraps in your stash and you don't know what to do with them? Or do you just need a few different ideas of how to use them to make cards? Stay with me and I show you how I start. I plan to make maybe 6 or 8 cards using my scraps, and I ended up with 15. Yeah, that was a huge crafting session. It's been a massive video. I sped it up a lot, and I won't show you in detail all of them, but I'll show you how I got to these results. I I have scraps in all colors, so I am using rainbow, but you can choose any color palette that you want and do the same thing or something similar. So this is how I store my scraps, and I store them by family color, but then they have all different shades. What you can do is mark where you want to cut your strips, or just shift it. I These ones, the wider ones, were 1/2 inch, so you can just shift 1/2 inch on your ruler, on your guillotine, or mark them prior if they are not even or something like that. I am just showing you to give you 2 different ideas. So for each color that I cut, for each shade, I die cut 3 of the wider ones and about 8 or 9 of very thin strips. I would say they're like 1/8 or less. I didn't really measure them. I just shifted a little bit, and I die cut 8 or 9 slim strips. But you can use those dies as well if you want them to be all the same width. So I did that for all of my colors. You can see here, I started with 19. So for each color, I got like 2 or 3 different shades. And now I'm cutting the double-sided adhesive. I'm using the one from Altenew. I'm going to get just some printing paper and put that adhesive on one side. And I kind of wish I had started with card front size panels, because the ones that I did in an angle kind of diagonally, they ended up with a weird angle on the cards. So if I had started with the right size, I could have avoided that. But it's not a big deal. It's something for you guys to correct when you do yours. So I'm just gonna lift that protection on the double-sided adhesive. I'm not gonna pull all of the thing. I'm just gonna free some areas, and I'm gonna start putting those strips down, sorry. So I started with the very thin ones, and I chose the angle that I wanted them to be. And I already had them arranged in the color order that I wanted them to go down. So I'm just gonna do that over and over, and I'll show you. I won't show you in detail all of them. So I did for each one, the slim strips, I did one panel, this one diagonally. I did one with them straight. And I did the same thing for the wider strips. So I did one panel for them going diagonally and one for them going straight. I had 4 big panels in the end. 2 of them were half a page size, and 2 were about 8 1/4 by 8 1/4, or 8 1/2 by 8 1/2. So I'll show you how I trimmed them down to use them on the cards as well. Just bear in mind that some of my cards I used 2 pieces, but you could use only half and like emboss a white panel and put on the other half when you use it diagonally. It's a design that I didn't use on these cards, but it works very beautifully. And maybe use like a strip of a different color. I am going to use gold with all of my cards, but you could use silver or any other metallic color that you like. I think black would go very well as well. Black, probably the glossy black. Sorry, I forget my words. The one thing that I'm doing with the color art here is that I try to go like from lightest into darkest and then darkest into lightest, which you might want to change. Maybe you want them all in the same order. So always lightest into darkest or always darkest into lightest. And this takes a while. I think this is what takes the longest, is putting all those strips down. And then I'm gonna just trim them. These are the final panels that I got, the 4 final panels. And I did have a few strips left that I used some of them also in another card. So for each panel, I just cut them into half. This one, I'm gonna cut one of them into a card size, and I'm gonna have a small rectangle left. The other one, I just cut it in half. And each half I'm gonna cut diagonally. So I'm gonna have 2 other pieces out of each one of those. Now these ones, because the colors were very separate, I cut them in half. I started cutting them in half. So I'm gonna have mostly the cold colors on one side and the warmer colors on the other side. Because I cut my adhesive smaller than my pen, I had a few pieces coming off. So I just needed a bit of glue to add them back. And then I'm gonna cut those in half once again. Oh, actually, yes. That's where I did first. And then I'm gonna bring, I forgot already. It's been a few days. So I'm gonna bring my other panel and I'm gonna do the same thing, cut it in half twice. This is the one with the straight lines. And this one, because the strips are very slim, it doesn't make a huge difference. So I cut it in half. Here I'm gonna cut a strip from the center that's kind of wide, and I'm gonna have 2 pieces left. And I'll show you the 2 cards that I'm gonna make with those pieces later. This one here, I'm gonna start just die cutting rectangle, and I'm gonna center it on the panel so I have a border to use on one card and the rectangle to use on a second card. So that's why I said that from each one of those panels you could get at least two cards, and that's how I ended up with so many. And I'm gonna do the same thing later on with another panel. And this adhesive is very thick, so I did have to come with a craft knife and cut through some small pieces that it wouldn't go through, even though I ran it 2 or 3 times actually. But it's not a big deal, and I just find that it's easier to back it up on a piece of printing paper, so you don't have to deal with any of those strips individually. Once you put them down, you can hold them all as one piece. So here's a suggestion of what you could do with those panels. You could just stick them down like that and change directions, and you will have a beautiful pattern for a card. Cut the excess. You could do it diagonally or straight. And I'm gonna do something else. I'm just showing you that there are other options to use them that I haven't used on my cards, but you could use it on yours if you want to. And all that excess that you cut off, you could actually use them on other cards as well. So you can change the arrangement, maybe put some gold or silver strips around those patterns. And this one could look like a herringbone one. And I am just showing you on the screen like how I kind of go about figuring out what patterns I want, but I didn't necessarily use all of them. This one I am going to use later. Well, I'm gonna use with the diagonal ones, not with the straight ones. So what I actually chose to do was die cut these ones into 1/2 inch strips. Remember that I cut these strips originally 1/2 inch spaces, and I'm going to cut them again as 1/2 inch. So I'm going to have squares. They're 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. They are not exact, but once you use them in the pattern, you can actually see that it kind of fools your eye into believing that they are perfect. They are not perfect. But if you do use those strips, the die cut sentiments, you could have them all the same size. I don't have those, so I had to use my paper trimmer. Here, the same thing with the diagonal ones. You could rearrange them the way you wanted. But this is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna cut the ones that are straight into 1/2 inch spaces. I just cut off the little bits that were not aligned. And I'm gonna have one in the end that is longer, is slightly bigger than the others. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the warmer tones. These ones are kind of the cooler. In the end, I'm gonna have a bunch of strips and I'm gonna glue them on a panel, onto a panel, a card front. And I'm gonna make it look kind of like a a chessboard pattern, I would say. So if you had like only 2 colors, that's what it would look like, because I have so many colors. You will see there's a repetition and there's a pattern, but um, yeah, you see it here. So I'm just gluing them down, and what I'm gonna do is glue every strip beside that it's going to go like to the right of this one square down, if that makes sense. So you see that the light red is one square down from the other one, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to do that for the whole entire pattern. And then I'm going to come back and fill in the spaces with the colors that follow them. They will be in the same order, but just one square down from each other. And I had to sped this video up because I had 330 minutes of footage, so I had to sped it up to the high heavens. But if you want to see in detail what I'm doing, please, by all means, you can slow it down. When you watch it on YouTube, you can choose the speed. I just didn't want to make this video like 40 minutes long, so I had to speed it up a lot. And then I also had like this green, it was just like a piece from one of the other cards, one of the other strips that I had left, because I didn't want to cut into the other strips, just to get that bit of green. But some of them were wider, so I also had to trace on them, like this one, and score and cut it. And that thin strip that I'm cutting off, I'm going to use on the very edge. And I just mark it with a pen, an empty pen, and I used my T ruler to trace it straight, and I cut it down with the scissors. So you don't even need the guillotine to do that. Now I'm cutting off the excess, and this is my final panel. I didn't get the full range of colors, I believe, on this one, but it's okay. And these were some of the strips that I had left in the end. I cut down the double-sided adhesive also into 1/2 inch strips, and I'm gonna stick those strips to the back of the colored ones. So each one of the colored strips will have a piece of double-sided adhesive stuck to it. Once again, I just lift that protective backing of the double-sided adhesive a little bit. I line it up carefully, and then I start pulling the backing down to make sure that it's aligned. If you get it a little bit off, or if the sizes are a bit wrong, you just come with a pair of scissors and you cut off the excess. It's not a big deal. So for this one, I'm going to use a piece of acetate instead of cardstock. I am going to put those strips down, kind of try to space them. I just eyeballed everything. I didn't measure anything. And then I'll lift off that backing and put the strips down. I am using a T ruler to make sure that they are going down straight. but the spacing I didn't measure. There was no you. Well, I can't tell the difference. Probably you folks will be able to. I can't. But I'm gonna just do this one by one and pull the adhesive and line it up right against the edge of my ruler to make sure that it goes down straight. Uh, it it's something that you have to do a bit slowly and pay attention to, but it's not like difficult to do or anything. And this one is an idea that I got from the online card classes recently. So I believe it was Dana Joy. She used acetate to emboss with a 3D embossing folder, and I loved that idea. So I decided to make one of my cards inspired by her idea, and I really like how it turned out. I think you could use any pattern for your 3D embossing folder. I chose an older one from Tim Holtz and Sizzix because it's kind of a busier pattern and I thought it would look better. So I'm just gonna run it through my die cutting machine. This is my embossing sandwich that I have written down. If you haven't watched that video, I made it a while ago about how uh, to choose a sandwich for your embossing folders if you have a Sizzix machine. So I just refer to it. But because I'm using acetate and it's thinner than cardstock, I added some of the backing paper to it. I think it was like 2 or 3 pages of the backing of the adhesive that I had used before. This panel, I'm doing the same thing that I did before, so I'm gonna get 2 uses out of one panel. This is the one with the straight stripes. I just run it through kind of in a bit of an angle so you don't get that kick from your die cutting machine. And I ran it through a couple of times, but as I said, the adhesive is very thick, so I did have to use my craft knife to cut it through the adhesive because the paper was actually cut. It was just the adhesive. It's not a lot of work and it's very quick to do. I just want to take a minute to thank everybody who's been watching my videos lately and signing up to my channel this week has been crazy busy for me. And I feel so humbled and confused and happy that I have you guys here. I didn't think I would get this many people, so I'm getting a bit shyer than I already am. But I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you being here and your support and your kind messages. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I do these crazy videos once in a while. So, yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you. Okay, here I'm assembling 2 cards to show you how I did it. I just measured the space inside of the frame and I cut a piece of paper, cardstock, slightly bigger, and I glued it. I layered, actually, there were 2 layers of cardstock there, and I just added up with glue because I have dimension behind all of my sentiments. My sentiments, I just went through my pile of Simon Says stamp dice and I chose 15 different ones. And I die cut it once out of gold and once out of foam. And I glued the foam to the back of the sentiments because I was making too many cards, so I didn't want to die cut 3 or 4 times cardstock for each one of them. It would take me forever. And because they already have dimension, I didn't add that much more dimension to everything else, except for these ones, the smaller panels, I did add foam behind them, of course. I can't resist, folks. I love dimension on my cards, and sometimes I go over the top, so yeah. Well, so most of them, this is all I did. I just added a gold sentiment and called it done. A few of them, the ones like these ones that have a little bit more of white, I added some sequins as well. So this is one of the pieces of one of those panels that I cut into 3 parts. This one actually get to choose the angle I want it to go down. And I just measured against my card base, and I marked with a pencil where I needed to add glue so I don't have glue oozing out. I'm cutting the excess, and I'm actually adding it into an angle to the inside of my card as well. So I'm doing the same thing, tracing it with a pencil where I need to add the glue, putting the glue down and cutting off the excess. I haven't used um, everything I have left inside of my cards, but I might go back later and add them to the inside of my card because I think it's nice to have that detail that ties in with the front. Um, I didn't show it on camera because it took me forever to film this. I got sick this weekend and I really wanted to finish the video so I can send it to you. But I will use those leftovers inside of my cards as a detail. So this one, everything that I did diagonally, I am adding like a thin strip of gold mirror cardstock. This is an idea that I saw on Instagram. I can't remember who did it, but I thought it was gorgeous. So I'm taking their idea. If it was you, please let me know. I will give you a shout out. And I'm adding that sentiment to the top. This one is one that I said that you could add um, an embossed a 3D or 2D embossed folder to the white area and just add your sentiment on top. But because I really like the colors, I didn't feel like adding a lot more to any of my cards, except for those sequins that I'm going to come back with later. So this one, I added double-sided adhesive behind those strips, and that's all I'm going to use. I'm going to borrow my stamping platform to use the corner to line it up, as you see here. So I'm just going to remove the backing of the adhesive and put it down. I think that if you use the corner of your stamping platform, it goes down perfectly straight. I don't trust myself to glue things with this powerful adhesive. You know, it's very unforgiving. It's very good. It's trustworthy, but it's not forgiving, as you know. And I am adding just glue behind my sentiment. I'm not using double-sided adhesive because I forgot about it, but because it has paper. I think it will be more than enough. It will work okay with this one. As I said to you guys, I'm not going to show you into detail how I did all of the cards, but I'll talk you through it at the end. So this one, I did trace a line halfway through my panel because I wanted half to be kind of the colder tones and the other half the warmer tones. I'm just going to add glue to the half, put the panel down, and then I'll do the same thing on the other side. I am trying to line up those strips in a way you see here in a second, and then I'll just trim down that excess and call it done. See, like I kind of try to line them up where they one side ends and the other side begins, but as I said, they were not perfectly cut to size, so you can see the difference, but it's not huge. And then this one, I'm just adding a sentiment because the bottom of my sentiment is straight. I'm using a T-ruler to mark where I want it to go. I used foam, so it's a bit wiggly, but it worked okay. And every one of them, I put a block on top to hold it down until the glue dries. So these ones, I'm adding those bits of confetti or sequins, and I use the same for every one of them. They're from Trinity Stamps. And these are my final cards. So those kind of square pieces, I cut them into half and I spread them, and I use the space to add the sentiment. This one was a square as well, so I cut it, put the sentiment in the space in between. So these ones are two pieces of the same one. This one was the one that I had left when I cut it in the beginning. This one was also square, this one as well. and I just added those golden strips in between. And this one I had two like that. I showed you how I made this one, but the other one was the same. This is the one 3D embossed. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.